Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14. It is the off-season in SEC hoops, but as you know, the off-season now is not what it used to be. Constant player movement, transfers, coaching changes, guys coming and going. And I guess the lead story this morning, Blake, at least the lead since the last time we did this, is one of the key guys in the SEC who probably had a chance to go pro is coming back, and that is Florida's Colin Castleton.
Yeah. I've always say I don't know I'm not good at predictions, and I know everyone, probably in certain instances are. I never know what to expect these days when it comes to what guys are going to do. And, so I think that's something where you just didn't know. I mean, it's like with everyone's roster, you didn't know what to expect. And, so I think it's certainly, I don't know how you could ask for a better off-season gift than that, to have him coming back if you're Todd Golden. And now, as we said, rosters always change when there's a coaching change, but that's just, it's huge for Florida. There's no doubt about it. Him coming back is significant. They get the kid from Belmont as well, and so it's been a nice several days for Florida. I think when you look at it from that aspect, when you consider getting Castleton back specifically, I think it's a huge pickup. And yeah, I just think that, that there were going to be some exits roster-wise, but you get the biggest player back on your team, and that's a huge boost, because they were one of the teams we put in the category of not really knowing what to expect when we started listing off who could be the top teams in the league next season. They were one you just didn't know where to put them because you didn't know what the roster was going to look like. But now they've got a pretty big piece to build around. So yeah, that's a big win for Todd Golden and company.
Well, and if you haven't followed Florida, there was a big loss with Tyree Appleby gone too. So just in case people missed that, which it's easy to miss, it's not been all good news for Florida since the coaching change.
Yeah, but I still think it's one where, like we said, there's going to be exits, and now you've got Castleton coming back, the Belmont transfer coming in, and there's just there's a lot of different things now they can build around. So even when you lose Appleby, I think it's still one where they're going to be sitting in at least a good spot, because if you take the team without Castleton, you take the team with Castleton plus Appleby's exit, one of those situations is much better than the other. So I think that, Florida will probably now be in a pretty good position to kind of settle in there somewhere in that, beyond maybe those top several teams that we mentioned, at least how things look as of right now in mid-April, knowing that a lot of that could change. So,
well, the Belmont transfer, if people don't know, was Will Richard. And the other thing, Anthony DeRugi's going pro too. I presume that's not the NBA, but that's one that you would have liked to have had back if you're Florida.
Yeah. At this point, I just assume no one's coming back when it comes to
that's where we are, isn't it?
That's the only way. It doesn't matter if it's a coaching change or not a coaching change. I think you just assume that your entire roster is not coming back, and then you just take the victories where you can get them. Fortunately for LSU, their entire roster isn't coming back, and so I think that's how you have to look at it. And like I said, I specifically think that way on coaching changes, because it's just the nature of how things work. I just always assume no one's coming back. And so when you get a big win like this, you'll take it. And so I think that gives Golden a chance to have some success. And look, they'll keep adding to their roster. But I think that, that they've got a couple nice pieces now for sure to build around. And look, they've got some of those other guys coming back too, at least as it stands right now. So
what else are we watching in SEC hoops?
Just hit purple commits and just hit refresh.
Right. This will be dated by the time we have it uploaded, right?
Yeah, it happened the last time. I don't remember who it was the last time, but we recorded something. There was a big transfer right after. Yeah, because it was several days ago last time we recorded, and I think that Shane Dezzoni at Vanderbilt transferred.
St. Joe's.
Brandon Huntley Hatfield, I think, is the biggest one we haven't talked about. Him leaving Tennessee is pretty significant, because I think that, look, he came in as a very top prospect, and we know, we kind of look at just everything. We talked about him down the stretch being someone that didn't necessarily play a ton of minutes at times, but still he was a freshman, right? And he'd reclassified and all that. And so I think it was, I don't know, that was one that I was surprised by for sure, because I think that you kind of saw him as a
Mm-hmm.
building block moving forward for them. And he's still got all the tools you need to be an NBA player. And I was a little surprised by that one. But I don't, maybe some people weren't surprised, but I just thought that was, look, I mean, he's a very talented player, and someone's going to get a terrific player, I think, as he continues to improve his skill set. So that was one that kind of was a little surprising. I think that we haven't talked about. I think we've talked about all the Arkansas ones at this point. Everybody they brought in to this point. Trey Gomillion from Cleveland State is going to Missouri. As I said, I expected a couple of those Cleveland State guys to wind up with Dennis Gates there. Demoy Hodge is the other one out there. I don't think he's made a decision yet, but I know he was. I think he was on a visit too from Missouri, and so was Noah Carter. That's the other one. I think if Missouri could land Carter, that would be another big one. I think for Dennis Gates this offseason, we've already talked about some of the ones that he's landed. So that's probably the bigger points right now. I mean, it's still going through the draft process for some of these guys we've talked about, and could they come back? Could they not? I mean, guys like Oscar Tshiebwe, right, and trying to figure out what he's going to do, and so there's just, I mean, this is just kind of the nature of where things are right now. Is it's going to take a little time for things to, as we said this last week. I mean, give it about a month, and I think you'll have a much better idea of where things stand. But beyond that, right now, I think it's just you're chasing transfers, and you're trying to rebuild your roster. Some teams more than others. I mean, Georgia's had a couple more players, I think, since transfer, so they don't really have Mike White doesn't have a ton of people there at the moment, but I think he'll build I think Mike White will build a solid enough group to be able to not go to the NCAA tournament or anything next season, but I think they'll have a chance to make some strides. Um, yeah, I mean, beyond that, I think, have we talked about Mark Sears at Alabama? I don't remember if we did or not.
I feel like we mentioned it in passing.
Well, he's officially going to Alabama, so
Okay.
if we didn't talk about it, there you go. That's one of the biggest additions of the off season, I think, for anyone. So that's big for Alabama because they've had guys transfer too. We talked about Shackelford leaving, and I think James Rojas put his name in yesterday, maybe. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest pickups for any team in the SEC this offseason is Mark Sears. I think he'll be really good there in Nate Oates' system. So yeah, you're playing connect the dots. You're putting the puzzle pieces together, and it's hard to tell you exactly what I think about every team, not knowing how the pieces are going to look, because there's still a lot of missing ones for a lot of different teams.
So the list, and this is just off the top of our heads, of guys we're watching on pro coming back. Tshiebwe would be on there. Scottie Pippen Jr. would be on there. Trying to run down in my head anybody at Auburn that's not made a decision that would be Jalen Williams. I know at Arkansas we talked about, right? I think that's still up in the air a bit potentially.
Yeah, I think as mentioned in our comments on the last one, we kind of hinted that, but I mean I don't know. I think they're bringing in so many guys now that you're starting to wonder, right? So yeah, that's another one. But I think
Green or KD Johnson at Auburn. I wouldn't think they'd be NBA guys, but guys have a chance to play pro ball elsewhere sometimes. I'm just trying to cover all our bases. Yeah, that's what I thought. Castleton would have been huge on the list, and we know now. So
I think it's honestly silly to try to even in this day and age. Like, I think it's so hard to predict what guys are going to do, and that's why I think there have been some guys we've thought have been surefire first round picks that leave their availability open. They wind up coming back, and guys who maybe are going to be the 58th pick, and you think they're coming back, and they wind up going. And so yeah, it's and as we said, the NIL situation makes things a lot more interesting now. So a lot to be determined for a lot of SEC teams. So sorry we can't give you much more in-depth analysis right now, but I think it's just I don't think it's worth probably telling you exactly what we think is going to happen in November when a lot of teams don't even have a starting five yet. They don't have a roster of starting five. So
I'm sitting here thinking we've called this free agency. It's not even pro sports free agency. At least you sign contracts there and you're bound for time. This is. I mean, I know this. I'm not breaking new ground here, but this is just satisfaction is temporary anymore. I mean, it can change from minute to minute. It seems.
yeah, I don't know. It's a tough call on some of the stuff. So it's just it's a really tough call. I think when you try to figure out who's coming back and all those things and who's staying and who's going, and that's why again we talked about with Arkansas. I think Arkansas is one where you have a much clearer picture just because of how loaded the recruiting class is. But then you add the transfers to the mix. I think they're one you get a pretty easy handle on right now. But I don't know if there's anybody else across the board that you really have a great feel for going into next season. I mean, like we said, you could see it with Kentucky and Alabama because of some of the freshmen that they're bringing in. But like we said, I mean, it's Sheboy, it's his decision. Guys like that, there's still way, way long to go here when it comes to filling out a roster for a lot of teams. So,
any parting thoughts here?
Nope. We'll just continue to hit refresh on verbal commits and see who the next person is to transfer in or out. That's all I know to say. Like I said, I'd keep an eye on a couple at Missouri. I'm not just saying that as the Dennis Gates guy, but I think that's the next team that we're starting to fill out some spots. That's one I'd keep an eye on. LSU, as we know, still needing to rebuild a lot of roster spots there after everyone transferred. And so those are a couple teams I think to keep an eye on. As we mentioned, Florida's doing some good work. Mississippi State's an interesting one. I don't really know what to think there just yet, just because I don't know what the roster is going to look like. So I know they picked up the kid. We may have talked about that from Oregon State, but that's where things are. Just waiting to see how rosters are filled out. So,
well, busy time for all of us. The last couple of weeks was a time for Blake and I to breathe a little bit and take care of some personal things. We're going to get on a little bit more regular content schedule. That's the plan. We're both busy with other stuff. I want to get more baseball things up than we've had. That's something we're working on. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hit subscribe if you haven't. We'll see you again soon.